playing with that. We just turned on the latest language version in the CS Proj. It's really pretty. So you don't have to, I mean, you can.
Where a lot of this stuff really comes together.
True.
We didn't update our templates, for example, in .NET 5 to use top-level statements, despite it being supported by the language. Okay. If Fowler is asking me to zoom in, which one, Fowler? Like, this is zoomed in quite a lot already.
Got
I
quite
can
a
zoom
bit
in
going on.
more.
So I can disappear.
I can zoom in the console more. There we go. Just hide our faces. That's easier.
Yeah.
So let's go to 6 now. So we've seen what, this is kind of what we could have done in 5 in terms of top-level statements, but this was an experiment. So what did we do to take the results of that experiment, plus more features that are introduced in C# 10, aka .NET 6, to simplify this yet even more. So
C# 10 is the current version of the language. So C# 10 is what comes with Visual Studio 2022.
If I look at, I'm in my 6x folder now, so let's just make sure I'm using the 6x version. I am. Excellent. So let's go in here and we'll do .NET New Web, Web 1 in this folder. Okay, and then I'll open up that in VS Code, and then we can see what this looks like now. Boom, right?
Let me zoom in a little bit. This is what a new ASP.NET Core Web API looks like. And that's it. 4 lines of code. No async, no await, no using, no startup class, no main, nothing. Compare that to the hello world in Node.js Express. It looks nearly identical. Imagine you are a student, or you were a student 2 years ago, you've never seen ASP.NET Core, and you create in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code a new project, and you will see code like that. That will not make you feel bad, right? You take a look at it and you say, oh, that's simple. I maybe should take a closer look at C#, and that's exactly what we want.
Look at that. So it's even less code than we had in the Feather experiment, because something you alluded to now, the code is too big now. We need to zoom back out.
Where are all the usings?
Something that you alluded to was global usings, right? So global usings is a feature of C#.
Okay, we have a new feature in C#. He is mentioning it. He will describe it in more details. But let me quickly demonstrate this new feature to you so that you get a closer understanding what this is, because I think it's worthwhile discussing it before we take a closer look at the video. Let me create in Visual Studio 2022 a console app, a quick console app here. Let's put it here, and let's select .NET 6. Let me quickly check if recording is running. Yes, recording is running. Everything is good. Now this is what a console app in Visual Studio 2022 looks like. Single line of code, console write line. See that one? Now if you want to, for instance, work with the string builder, you would have written something like this. var sp new string builder. Something like this, right? And now I get a mistake, I get an error that says, hey, I have no idea what string builder is. Usually, what you did in the past few years, you just used the light bulb and added using system text. You see it up here? Now C# 10 has a new trick for you. And this trick is called global usings. Let me show you what I mean. You add a new file, for instance, an imports.cs. It doesn't matter how it is called. It can be any file. Delete everything. And now let me show you what I do. I take this using system text, cut it here, put it here. I still have my error, you see it? And now I say global here. Boom, it's gone. Error is gone. So global usings are a possibility where you can add using statements that you need all across your app, and you put it in a single file, and everywhere else they are simply there. Got it? That's useful. Of course, this example is not very useful because it consists of a single file. But imagine that you have a project consisting of hundreds of files. Then global usings will really boil down your using statements. They are on a single place and they are valid everywhere. Got it? Global usings? Yeah, question.
What are negatives to using global using?
What are what?
Are there negatives?
Some people, are there negatives? Some people would say, well, I take a look at this one here and I see the string builder and I'm not really sure where it comes from. That is one thing. It's not kind of obvious. Again, it's a little bit of magic. It's just there. And people might ask, where did it come from? Another problem is that you might create a new class here, string builder, something like this. And if I remove this guy here, yeah, here you have a string builder. In this case, it's okay. But imagine that we have a namespace. You would probably not do that. System.text, something like this. We create a namespace system.text.string-builder. This is not what I wanted to do. Yeah, something like this. var sb equals new string builder. Question, which string builder do you use? This one or this one? The problem with the global using is that you don't even see by looking at this file that there is a global using. Understand what I mean? If I would take the using statement here and put it somewhere here, it would be kind of obvious that I'm now using the string builder from down here because this is in light gray. You see that one? So Visual Studio makes it very clear that there might be a problem. But global usings are a little bit like Harry Potter programming, a little bit of fairy dust and it magically works. But sometimes magic doesn't work as expected. You have all seen Harry Potter, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's a drawback. I think they will discuss it in the video too, so that's good that they will describe it or discuss it again.
10, which enables you to, in C# anywhere, you can define a using as being global for that project. So instead of just saying using blah, you can say global using blah. But we don't have any usings here, so how is that working? Well, we took the global usings feature and then we built an SDK level feature, an MS build feature effectively, that's implemented in the SDK that we call implicit usings. And it uses the C# 10 global usings feature to let you define global usings in MS build. So they become implicit to your code because they're not in your code, they just get added by the SDK.
Let me show you what they mean with that. The thing that I did here with this global using is not really necessary because, let me remove this demo here. Just keep this console right line. Let me ask you a question. What is the namespace where console can be found? Answer, system. So it's system.console.writeline. So wouldn't we expect to see a using system somewhere? We could write it. It's fine, but it's not necessary. Why? Do we have any other file where we could look for global usings? No, there is no other file. So where does the using system come from? And that's brand new. It comes from this one. This is what he means. Implicit usings, you see it? Implicit means that you don't have to write them. The Microsoft guys sat down and said, which namespaces are typically imported, used by nearly everybody? And it turns out that nearly everybody uses system. So what they did is they created a NuGet package. The NuGet package contains the global using. You refer to the NuGet package up here. Implicitly, you refer to it, and therefore you just get using system for free. That's the new implicit using feature. A small feature, but extremely useful. So for you, for this year, you will probably never ever write using system anymore because it's just there. And that again makes it easier for people to start. because they can't forget using system. Or how often have you forgotten using system link? Yeah? .where is simply not known. What is the problem? You need system.link. Good news, you will never write using system.link anymore. It's an implicit using now. Good news, isn't it? Okay.
Or by your own MS Build files that are interpreted by the SDK. And then by default, in .NET 6, for new projects created, we do this. We just imply that you are going to use a certain amount of global usings. So all of those usings that we saw in this example here, they're on by default. You get those in every CS file in an ASP.NET Core 6 app by default if you create a new project. Now, in a little caveat here, in Preview 7, the release going out today.
The caveat that he's describing here does no longer apply. We already live in release candidate world, and there everything works smoothly.
That's only guarded by does your project target .NET 6. So if you take an existing project and you change the TFM in the project file, so I go to my project file and I set this to .NET 6.0 like it is here, then I just get the usings, right? Like, so that early feedback on that was that can cause some issues for existing projects. So in the next release, which is already being worked on now, that will be behind a flag that looks like this. So new projects will actually have this property that says implicit usings enable.
So for you, you create new projects, and this is just there. It just works, okay? Also for your Matura, it will just work. You can expect that to just work. You don't need to do anything special.
And that's what will turn them on, rather than automatically turning them on based on TFM. So if you upgrade an existing project to .NET 6 and you...
by the way, you heard that now multiple times, and if you work in the .NET space, you will hear that term very often. He just said TFM over and over again. In the TFM, TFM, TFM. What is TFM? TFM stands for Target Framework Moniker. And it's just the name for this .NET 6 settings. Last year, you had .NET 5. The year before, you had .NET Core 3.1. Now it's .NET 6. And this thing is called the Target Framework Moniker. And everybody in the .NET world refers to it as TFM. So if you get asked, what is your TFM? You say .NET 6.
You want the implicit usings, you'll have to also add this property to get them. Okay? So that's just something I wanted to say there.
So,
and that's why this is. Can that break stuff? Potentially. It can, potentially, and in reality it did break a couple of things in some very complicated repos when we tried it out internally, like the .NET repo and the ASP.NET Core repo. And the usual way in that it can break is with type conflicts. And so if you have...
This is what I wanted to describe to you when I showed you the example with the system.string builder, system text string builder.
Two classes or two types in the universe of things that you depend on or reference in your project that have the exact same class name, and then you import both namespaces, you'll get a type conflict because the compiler doesn't know if you meant task from system.threading blah blah blah, or if you meant task from msbuild blah 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 if you reference both. And the way to work around that is you can use an alias, right? So using supports aliases now. You can say using foobar is equal to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core, whatever. I can say.
No, you are not allowed to invent funny names. So I don't want you to rename console to some funny Austrian name, okay? So it is possible to rename things, yeah, but no, please don't.
Yeah, that now is that thing, right? Or you can also do it for a specific type. So you can bring in, you can alias a specific type that way as well. So now I can refer to this using this and just change it completely, and I can break the conflict that way.
He's just referring to the fact that they are using this feature to solve this problem.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so now it's no longer a conflict. So that's how you can work around that if you hit that issue.
Someone asked in the chat, can you add your own implicit usings or global usings?
Yes, you can. And so because this is an SDK feature, once you've opted into implicit usings like this, and in fact, you don't even need to opt into implicit usings because they're not treated as implicit if you specify them explicitly in a MS Build file. you can, in an item group, and again, this is going to be the case in the next release, not the release that's out today, because we've made some adjustments to this, is you can define them using a using item like this, okay? And then you'll say include, if I wanted to include everything in the ASP.NET Core.MVC namespace, which is complete overkill, but say I wanted to do that, you could do that, and now that namespace is automatically included in every CS file because that will emit a global using inside a generated CS file that you'll see, that the compiler will see, but is not in your source code.
You could also, as I showed you, create an import.cs file and write global using. That's the same. Right? This is just a compiler setting if you want to go for the compiler.
Okay.
Right, and you can do that in a NuGet package, and if it's just your own project, you can use the C# feature as well and just put it in a separate file.
I will now jump over a few minutes because they are going over and over about this global using stuff and MS build, but that's not that important for us. I want to jump to minimal API. Give me a sec.
All right, so staying in this template now, we can see it's really simple, right? We have this web application.create builder, which returns a builder similar to before. At this stage in here, I can do stuff to configure the builder before I run build. The most common thing you would do is add services to the DI container, right?
This builder.services is what last year we did in configure services. We don't need a startup class anymore. We don't need to put it in a separate class. We just say builder.services.add and that's it. Just a single line.
And so if we think back to the 3x application and the 5x where we had a startup class where we would traditionally be configuring our services and then setting up our middleware pipeline, to now you would do that here. So you would configure your services in here. You might also configure the configuration providers in here. And then after you call build, you get back an app. And the app is the thing that you configure your middleware on. So here I'm doing a map get, which is an example of one of the new minimal APIs that we added in .NET 6 that says, hey, when you get a request for /, can you run this delegate here?
This looks completely different from last year. Last year we created controllers. Can you remember that? We created controllers and then we used attributes with the square brackets for get, put, post, patch, and so on. And now the new minimal API got rid of this whole controller notion. All you have to do is you have to create this app builder. Sorry, you have to create the app. This is what I meant, line 4. And then you have separate methods. Map get, map post, map delete, map put. Understood? And then you just give it the URL on which it should listen and the delegate. That's it. No classes anymore, no controllers, nothing.
Yeah, and this delegate is a anonymous lambda.
So you say mapget is new. I think I've seen that method before.
So this is a new overload. Mapget has been around since .NET Core 2.1 because I think I wrote the original version of it, and I had to fight Fowler to get it in. He didn't want it, but we've come a long way. And so this is a new overload that knows how to take a standard delegate that has no type information on it whatsoever other than the fact it returns a string and turn that into the underlying delegate type that the ASP.NET Core pipeline understands. We call it the request delegate. And that's a specific signature that is used, that all middleware has to implement, which basically means it has to take the same parameters and it has to return the same values. And that's what we build up the middleware pipeline with. So now we have a lot more support for taking delegates with different shapes and basically turning them into a request delegate under the scene, under the covers, and then plugging them into the middleware pipeline.
Okay, let's try that a little bit to make it very clear what's going on behind the scenes here. So, for demo purposes, I'm going to create an ASP.NET Core Web API project, this time with .NET 6. No Open API, I don't need that one for now. Okay, here we are. and this is the code that Damien was just showing. You see the create builder. You see this app builder stuff. And then here you see the run. But in the release candidate 1, there is also this support for controllers by adding add controllers and map controllers here. So if you add these 2 lines of code, you still can write code in the same way as we did last year. You see? Here is the controller with controller base, an API controller, and here you can say HTTP GET, and so on and so on. Exactly as we did it last year. So nothing is lost. You only got something new. So let me quickly demonstrate that to you in a single file. So I'm going to remove weather forecast here. I'm going to copy some stuff here so I don't have to type so much. So let's remove this controller and have a little bit of fun with this file here. That one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And then let's add in one file the hello world controller. And let's add some usings that we need. And now it looks good. Here in this hello world controller, just remember what we did last year. You give HTTP GET, you specify the verb, and then you say public string, I don't know, say hello. And you said return hello world. This was the code that you needed to write last year. Additionally, you had the startup class and so on and so on. Let me quickly check if I screwed up or if it worked. Get going. Yeah, here we are. Hello world. And we see hello world. It works. Now the following things happened to make it very clear and obvious what happened. Microsoft asked themselves, why is it necessary to map controller, to add controller, to build a class, know the base class, know the attributes, create a method, know this attribute, just to write hello world. That's too much. That's simply too much. So what they invented was a 2-step process. They said, let's use this method that Damien was just mentioning, map get. Here we can specify hello world new, something like this, and then we could write async code, something like await context goes to this one, oops, something like this, context dot, come on, context dot, write async, and of course await, and then they could say hello world. This was even too complicated, so they said, why do we need this async await stuff? So they removed all this thing and said, you know what, let's write it like that, and let's forget this print or write async and just return the result. And as a result, we came to this map get. This map get says, specify the URL, specify a method, and return whatever you want to return. And this single line is now replacing all this stuff down here for simple scenarios. Simple things must be simple. Complex things must be possible. That's the thing down here. Got it? So when you do your Matura, you can probably decide if you want to write the, I don't know, 5 or 6 HTTP methods or your homework, this week's homework. If you write your this week's homework, you have to implement 3 HTTP endpoints. 3, not more, 3. With the new minimal API, you can simply write it in this kind of writing. So you have everything in a single file and that's it. But as an alternative, you could create 1, 2, or 3 classes and put them in separate controllers if you want. For small projects, this might be an overkill. For large projects, it might be suitable. So what Microsoft did is they gave you, as the developer, more choice. Simple things can be expressed in a more simple way. Complex things are still possible. Got it? Clear? You could follow, right? Good. Let's continue.
And that's what Stefan's been working so hard on this release, is this whole mechanism for not only this part, which is let's simplify and create minimal versions of the boot up logic, but let's also create basically a minimal framework for mapping endpoints to routes in ASP.NET language, right? So you can think of this as a route. This is a route pattern, effectively. It actually is. It is exactly what this gets used for. And then this is an endpoint delegate. Or
who can remember what a delegate is? Damien was just mentioning an endpoint delegate. Delegate is a feature of C#. We discussed it last year. So what is delegate? That's perfectly correct. A delegate is a reference to a method, a typed reference to a method. So what he says is it takes a, zoom in a little bit, it takes a route pattern and maps the route pattern to a delegate. And the delegate is a reference to a function or a method. You are perfectly right.
Or a minimal action, or we've given it a few different names. This is
the
the
name
code.
is hard.
Yeah, a route handler. You could give it different names.
So geek out a little bit about
that. Yep. Sorry, I have a short question on this.
Yeah.
Like, I get what that is because I've seen the code and I understand there's this delegate and all that kind of stuff.
I want to jump over this discussion. Of course, I've watched this video before, so I know what I want to show you. And the next discussion is not that interesting for our topic.
So someone just asked, yeah, can you do this? Yeah, because we're combining a bunch of different language features here. And so I'll pause at this moment to say what this has enabled is that when we go on a learning journey.
Who can tell me what this is called? I think you mentioned it at the beginning of this lesson. Yes. String interpolation, exactly. This is a string interpolation. Guess what? This string interpolation, this string interpolation is turned into which code? What is .NET making out of it, of this dollar something? Yeah. String.format, something like this. In fact, I guess I would have to check, but in this case, as you can see, you are right, by the way, you're right. Typically, it is string.format. But in this case, if you take a look very closely, then you have a string at the beginning, and then the variable part is just at the end of the string. So I guess the compiler will optimize this thing and create a string.concat from it. Because the compiler is very smart. The compiler takes a look at the string interpolation and decides which approach is the the fastest one. And I guess it might be a concat here, but we would have to check it. We can just trust the compiler. It will do meaningful things. Exactly. It is a string interpolation
with a new user, and we develop some type of story arc, or we let the user drive the story arc, much like what we're doing here. We're responding to comments. You'll see how I think this is much more progressive. Like we're not having to see concepts introduced in the language or the framework until someone is ready, until they ask the question, or we're ready to tell them as the storyteller. So yeah, I can change that.
Let me quickly emphasize something. This has happened when I did the fast forward, but it's still a little bit interesting. I guess it's kind of clear, but let me point it out for you. Please take a look at the second method here. Do you see hello world? This hello world, as you can see here, is a separate method, a so-called method group. So what you could do, this hello world is just a method. So you don't absolutely need to write the lambda function here. You can also refer to a method which already exists. See? So if you have a little bit more code, you can put it into a separate method and just reference this method. Yes, question? The question is, do the methods have to be async? The answer is only if they do async work internally. So if the method, for instance, access the database or a file or do a web request over the network, then the methods should and have to be async. Yes, you have to write it. So what you have to do is you have to do something like this. app.mapGet, get something from DB. Oops, sorry. I'm not used to typing on this laptop. So something like this. Do something. Simulate DB access. Task.delay 100 milliseconds. Do something else. Return result. Something like this. Now, this would be wrong. We have to change it, async, and we have to put the await here. Now it's okay. Of course, in real world, this would not be task.delay. This would be a query to the database, accessing the network, something like this. Yes?
But I mean, if I have a method like the hello world method.
Okay, let's do that. So what we can do is we can take this here, this method, cut it out, put it here, and now we are good. This is what I wanted to show you. We will refactor that in a second. And now I can say util start access DB.
Okay, but I don't have to write the wait before the util start.
And now I got your question. You mean here?
Yeah.
No, because this is not a call to the method. This is, as you correctly said, a delegate. I'm just adding a reference. So behind the scenes, the map-get will take a look at this method and find out whether it is async or not. If it is async, it will do an await automatically. I think this is what you meant. Now I got your question. And by the way, this is the old stuff as you would have done it in the past. What you could do now is you can remove that one. That's the first thing that you can do. All you have to do is remove the public here. And now everything is good. So with, I think it was C#8 or C#9, you could even remove the classes. This is now a local function within this global program.cs. So this definitely works too. You can decide. Do you want to do it in a class or do you want to just put it here? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Good. Now I got it. Sorry that it took so long for me to understand your question, but it's good that we discussed.
String literal that I had before into an interpolated string in the same method. And I can say, yeah, you put $1 in front of a string literal, it turns it into an interpolated string in C#. And then I can use the curly brace syntax to template the interpolated string and pass in whatever value I want to be inserted into the string. And that was a nice step from it was just a string to now it's an interpolated string. And then
that's a good example for why having just a string overload might not be as convenient as you think, because if it was a string overload, it wouldn't work the same. Like the time would always be the same for every request as opposed to the time of the request.
Right.
So yeah, giving people that overload might actually cause problems down the road, who knows?
That is an interesting comment, and I think we can do a little quiz for that. Let's see. It is now date only, date time. Let's take date time today, something like this. So this is Hello World New. If I run this guy and I put it here, it will say it is now the 23rd of September 2021. Okay, that's okay. Now let's change that a little bit. Take a look at what I'm doing now. I'm taking this method here, this interpolation, moving it into a local variable. Var today equals to something like this, and then we just return today. Okay, let's run it. Let's go here. And it still works. No, it doesn't. This version is completely screwed up. It's wrong. What is the mistake with these two lines? Why is it a very, very bad idea to do it like that? That's perfectly correct. It becomes obvious when we write now instead of today. So if I run this stuff, and again, see, I can reload it as often as I want. The time does not change. So this is an important one, and you should understand that. By putting that here in that variable, the string is built during project startup, when you start the program. So it will be the time when you started the program. If you take this one here and put it inside of this delegate, then this code will be executed every time the HTTP request comes in. So for every HTTP request, you will get a new time. Let's quickly run this to see whether this is true. See? Now the time is changing. So this is an important distinction. I guess for many of you that's perfectly clear, but maybe for some of you that was a very good repetition, because it's a kind of subtle difference, especially now with the new minimal API.
And that's interesting, and that's really subtle, right? Because that gets to like lifetime and values and like delayed execution and all these type of things that can be difficult. And that's not just a C# thing. That absolutely would occur in JavaScript as well. Anything that can accept a method versus accepting a value, and then getting a mental map of, well, when does this code execute? Like, I understand that line 8 is going to execute when the application starts, and it executes before run, but this won't execute until a request to this comes along, right? And getting that mental model is incredibly important for a learner as they're learning how web application sort of object models work. And
I can tell you, when I do web development workshops with children, you know, I do a lot of work with children, and I have 9, 10, 11-year-olds who do web development together with me. Believe it or not, they think it's fun for some reason. It's super complicated for them to understand this concept. So what you just answered when I asked you, it is so complicated for beginners at that age to understand when do we execute what, because they have no clear picture in their mind what it means to pass a delegate, a function pointer, to a function. And if somebody in this class is still struggling with this notion of function references and deferred execution, just what Damien said, and this delegate thing, this is definitely something that you might have to repeat, because it is a crucial element of understanding that you will need for your Matura. But I think most of you should understand that.
Application models work. So yeah, this code all runs at the beginning. You know, this is where your app starts running, and then these little snippets are what runs when they match, when requests match these route patterns that you passed in.
So, and since these all are the same route pattern, it's going to execute all three of those, right?
Well, exactly. This is invalid. What you'll get actually is an error when you try and run this application. I think is it when you run, Stefan, or is it when the first request comes in? I can't remember.
I think it's during the request. It will say that it can't find a single.
It'll say ambiguous or something.
Yeah, okay.
Because you can't. It'll say what you said, John. I've got three routes that match the incoming request. I don't know which one. I can't disambiguate that. So this is invalid. Typically, you would obviously have these as, hello 1 and hello 2 and hello 3 or something like that, and then that would be fine.
Are we going to have time to show parameters? I know we're running low.
So let me fast forward, all right?
Yeah, so we basically, our hard stop is in a half hour from now.
Okay, so you have now seen how they managed to simplify this API with the global usings. And you see that the new map get overloads made it much simpler to create simple APIs. We don't need classes anymore. Believe it or not, we have just finished another hour and we have one final hour left. And this one final hour, we are going to take a closer look at more advanced scenarios. So in the last few minutes of this video, we will learn how we can do dependency injection and things like that. And I will also show you some reference. I wrote a small example that is in the GitHub repository that you can use as a basis or as a kind of copy template for your homework and your exercises, okay? So for now, let's do a short break. We have 5 minutes and we'll see each other in 5 minutes again and continue.